is Emily Reese. I am a career counselor here in the Office of Career Services, and today we're going to have a special presentation on graduate school CV and resume writing when it comes to that application process. So we're actually going to have Mack Morris, who is a graduate student and a student affairs intern here at Troy University, and also an intern with Education USA, who has given a lot of these presentations before, and we thought it would be great to have him come talk to you guys as Troy University students and share some of his knowledge. So again, please keep yourself on mute. You can type in the chat box and I'll be answering those questions, and Mack will actually have a time for questions at the end of this presentation. So I will go ahead and turn it over to you, Mack.
Yep. Yeah, thank you for the great introduction. My name is Mack Morris. Like Emily said, I'm a graduate student at Troy University, and I'm also a virtual intern with Education USA, which is a U.S. State Department network. It has advising centers in over, I believe, like 170 countries. So just pretty much promotes higher education to prospective international students. So that said, I'm going to start sharing the screen. Okay, so like Emily said, I'm going to be talking about effective CV writing for your graduate school application. So what is a CV? Why a CV? Well, obviously it's part of your graduate school admission process, and the CV is going to help you create an academic identity for yourself rather than the personal identity, which that would be more displayed in your interview or your personal statement. A CV is typically between 2 to 4 pages long. For someone that's just getting their bachelor's degree, this is typically going to be on the 2-page side of things. So it's okay, it's going to be a little bit shorter, but because everything on there is going to have a purpose, and the purpose is to get into graduate school, so everything is going to be very concentrated. Next is going to show the admission committee's one's qualifications. So the way to look at the CV and all the parts of the materials that you have when applying to graduate school is the purpose is to persuade the admission committee to accept you. And lastly, it's going to showcase experience and skills not displayed in other parts of the admission process. Like I mentioned earlier, in the interview, the personal statement, you're going to talk about maybe your things that would make intangible skills that would make you a good addition to the program. But on your CV, it's going to talk about your qualifications, academic experiences that will make you a good addition to the program. So what to include in the CV? Well, there are various sections. The first section to have is like a profile overview section. This is going to be a summary of the CV and your academic interest. I'll show this in action later in the presentation. We'll go through a couple examples. And the first section to include would be education. In education, you want to make sure to stick to your bachelor's degree or higher. So this would be whatever your bachelor's degree from Troy University would be, and maybe study abroad experience. Exception to this would be if you study abroad in high school. So if there are any international students listening, this is something that you could definitely add into the CV that would give you a competitive advantage. Or even if you're American and you happen to study abroad when you're in high school, this is something great to add. Next, under education, you could have a study abroad section. This is really great and looks really great on the CV to future employers and to the admissions committee. I believe there are not any current opportunities to study abroad, but I believe beginning in 2021, there's going to be quite a few study abroad trips and excursions. So if you haven't yet, this is something I highly encourage for you to look into. Next, you can also include key classes you've taken during that education experience. So for example, under the bachelor's degree you received or when you studied abroad, that you would include took so-and-so classes and even the professor's name. Next, you could also include the major. What did you major in? Also, what did you minor in? And if you completed a thesis in your bachelor's, this is really great to include. Not every program requires a senior thesis, so if you have completed one, or even a major study or senior research project, this is something really great to include in the under the education section that can definitely give you competitive advantage. And then you can also add some description of, what was the project, quantify description of what you did on the project. Next, I put GPA as optional because it truly is. The graduate school committee, they're obviously going to find out what your GPA is because they will have access to your transcripts. But if your GPA is high enough, for example, if you received a special honor like you were magna cum laude or something, you can also add the GPA. So there's no written rule as far as what GPA to include and what not to include. If it's high enough where you think it would show the committee that you would be a good addition to the program, you can include it. So the next section to include is experience. The experience section can be divided into categories like the teaching experience, professional experience, and research experience. This will help rather than have one big section where things are divided up. It's easier for the admissions committee to look at, and it's easy also for you to kind of organize where things will be, not just kind of clump everything together, organize everything. And you need to, when you're doing this, ask yourself, would these experiences contribute to me being a good graduate student? And this is something to ask yourself when you're going to add any experiences or any information to your CV. Is this contributing me to be a good graduate student? That was kind of difficult for me to say. So you want to make sure the answer is a strong yes, because if it's a no for you, it'll definitely be a no for the admissions committee. Because, like I said, applying for graduate school is very competitive, so you want to make sure everything on your CV accomplishes a purpose, and that purpose is being getting into graduate school. So next, some more sections to include: honors and awards from undergraduate experience and beyond. I will show a couple samples of these later on in the presentation. And also volunteer work is a good section to have. And this typically, is volunteer work you've done from like undergraduate experience and beyond. But for example, if you have been volunteering with the same organization for a long time, and you also volunteered when you were an undergrad, this is something you can add. And also, if you had any great volunteer opportunities or did any good work when you were young, certainly you can add this. And also, you want to kind of describe what did you perform, so the admissions committee is not left up to kind of decide or wonder what actually did you do. It's really easy for them to read, and you can showcase your skills, what you showed when you were volunteering. Next section is skills, and these are skills, not your intangible skills like I'm a hard worker, I can multitask. These are going to be, that's something you would talk about in your interview or your personal statement for graduate school. You're going to be talking about skills that translate to being a good graduate student, that are tangible. For example, you are fluent in a certain language or a programming language, to say. So skills related to the program. And I'll show some examples of this of someone who is applying for like an art, graduate school in art, and how they capitalized on this section to create a competitive advantage by showcasing, what they're fluent in, what skills they have, and how that will help them in the field in the future. I mentioned, like, for instance, is a great opportunity to showcase your language skills. not everyone is going to be able to add language skills that speak more than one language. So if you do, please add this. And I'll show an example of what this would look like in your CV. The next section to include memberships. Memberships related to the academic program, not just any like your Costco membership, anything like that. So if you're in organizations, clubs that are related to the academic program, towards that program, that study, that major. And also, this is a great time if you're a leader to add that you were a leader in this organization in the description, and add quantifiable description. And I'll show what this looks like later on in the presentation. And it also helps to add that you were a leader in these memberships, rather than create a whole section for it. So it looks more visually pleasing and kind of runs together, runs smoothly. Lastly, your references. You want to include academic and professional references. You don't want to include any family or friends. Unfortunately, this will look poorly on you, because the admissions committee is going to see this, and they're going to wonder, well, why isn't this person including academic and professional references? The school is an academic and professional environment. So, and I was going to add, it's great to have references and recommendations when they write your recommendation letters, like have people that are different. It's just going to show a wide variety, people who are willing to, I guess, go to bat for you. But if they are the same, I wouldn't worry too much. And if you don't have anybody right now that would be a good reference for recommendation, I highly encourage now, when you're undergrad, kind of networking, meeting with your professors, participating in clubs, organizations related to what you want to study and what you want to do in the future. And lastly, on these sections, you always want to remember to present the sections from most to least relevant. For someone that is just graduating with their bachelor's degree, the first most relevant section is going to be education, and probably going to experience. Unless you would be like a non-traditional student where you have a wealth of experience, then maybe you would put experience before education. So like I mentioned earlier, you want to make sure to focus on these academic experiences and professional experiences more than your you want academic and professional experiences more than your personal experiences. Personal experience is going to be more left up for the personal statement, interviews for the graduate program. And the content in each section should be related to the major. Like I said, ask yourself, is this something useful for me to be a graduate student? When you're describing under each section, make sure to make your descriptions use of bullet points, use of technical terms. By technical terms, I mean words, language that is relevant to the program. I'll have an example of this later, but for the person who is applying for, master's degree in art, she used curated to describe the duty she performed, rather than another synonym that would be more commonly used. Use of quantifiable descriptions. I'll have some examples of this. So this is something that can be measured. So it's easier to describe, what you did, what changes you made when you add these quantifiable descriptions. Also, you want to make sure you use a variety of action verbs. And this is something that doesn't just apply to your CV, but any type of writing. I'm sure if you've had like English 1101, 1102, you kind of understand what I'm talking about. So make sure you use a variety of synonyms. Even if you're describing the same action, make sure you change up the verb you use. And you want to make sure to start every description with the verb rather than the pronoun. Like I completed, you would start just completed so-and-so activity, so-and-so duty. It's something that's very important. I would have a qualified professional review your CV. what I mean by qualified is someone who knows that field of study, so they'll better know what to look for, what you can add, what you can elaborate on more. So I highly recommend having others review your CV and providing feedback. So this could be undergraduate professors or professionals in the field that you want to go into. So what to avoid? So you want to make sure to avoid grammatical errors. This is the biggest one. Grammatical errors will tell you, the selection committee, that you're not qualified. It's an automatic red X, because they're looking not just at your academic accomplishments, but also your professional, that you're professional, that you don't really make these little bitty mistakes. And also you want to make sure you use a consistent use of past, present, or future tenses. This is a common mistake people make when they're talking about activity they did in the past. They don't use the past tense of the verb. They might use the present tense. So make sure that you're aware of this. And this is where it also comes in helpful to have someone review your CV, because a CV is something that you looked at so many times yourself, and your brain automatically makes these connections. So make sure you get that outside or that fresh pair of eyes to look at the mistakes that could be on the CV. Next, inconsistent formatting and fonts. So you may make sure, if a section is bolded, that the next section will also be bolded. Keep everything consistent, because if it's inconsistent, it will distract the reader and be considered unprofessional. Next, race, age, religion, ethnicity. In the United States, it's illegal to accept or reject applicants based off these details. So universities, even companies, will avoid a CV that has this information to avoid legal trouble. And lastly, these credentials have no bearing on your academic ability. Like I said, everything on your CV should be there to accomplish a purpose, and that purpose is to get into graduate school. So adding that you're so-and-so old, what's your religion, ethnicity, it doesn't really matter. And lastly, don't use traditional colors. So use black when you're doing the CV. Not using non-traditional colors is not the way to make sure your CV stand out. So the first example I have here, I'm kind of going to walk through, kind of what I like, what I see in this CV, what's good, what pros, cons, things like that. So to begin up top, let's see if I can use, to begin up top, the name, this person includes appropriate information, so that they avoid information like the race, gender, ethnicity, picture. Some people add pictures, and please do not do that on CV. And that appropriate, reliable emails is so important. So the graduate school is mostly going to contact you by email, so make sure you add an email that is that you have access to, that you regularly check, and that is professional. So make sure you don't have anything too inappropriate, like in the username. On my CVs, I have Chwota.edu, and my name and the number they gave me is very professional. I don't use a so-and-so, like a nickname, things like this, because they do look at even the small details like this. Also, on your phone number, when you add your phone number to the CV, make sure that you'll have that phone. If you change phone numbers, update your CV, or let the graduate school committee know, the graduate school. But also check your voicemail box when you have your phone number on there, because If you have a voicemail box that's not set up, that could be a missed opportunity for you to get in contact with them, or show poorly on you that if you have a voicemail that is unprofessional. Also, I wanted to add, this person had their address on here. The address is not that important when it comes to the CV. It's not really going to help or hurt your chances of getting into the graduate school. So the first section is like the profile, the objective section. This person, lays out, what their research interests are. And the rest of the CV kind of acts as supporting details of why they'd be a good addition to that research initiative, why they would be qualified to perform that research. So you can look at this as almost kind of like an essay where you have your profile, your thesis statement, and then every other section works to kind of support why this person would be a good graduate student, why they would be good at this performing this research. So they begin with the most relevant information, which is education, and they include, key classes, key classes taken, minor, high GPA. And if they did a thesis, this would also be a great time to include. So under where it says Bachelor of Arts, Art History, it would be really good if you completed a thesis or a major research project, to add this in to the description. Next, instead of using a general section heading like experience, they specifically have like teaching experience. So it's really easy, divided up, very clean, very easy to read for you and the graduate school committee. And they offered a description, tutored local high school students in English composition and literature through after-school program. This is something that looks really good on the CV, something really relevant. The only question I could have is maybe if they could kind of quantify, for example, maybe they put how often the after-school program was, how often they tutored, or how many students they tutored would be a great example. And lastly, on here they have professional history, and this section is just like the professional experience. It's just they just added a different name. So to I guess to continue with the same CV, they had an art exhibition section, which is really relevant to what they're trying to do, which is getting to art school. So for a lot of, if you're not majoring art, it could be great to add like a presentation section, and show off, kind of what presentations you did. For example, I would put this on my CV because I'm a, student affairs major, and I want to work in student services and higher education. So I would add this presentation. They did a great job with kind of explaining what they accomplished at this exhibition. They used a variety of action verbs, like planned and arranged and curated. They kind of almost mean the same thing, but this is where that use of synonyms, use of technical terms comes into play. The word, curated, I've never heard it really used outside of the art community. Also, the descriptions are very concise, to the point, one line, not a lot to read, because please keep in mind, a lot of people will be submitting their CVs, so the admissions committee is going to look through a lot of these. So keep everything very concise, to the point. They use the correct tense. For example, they completed this activity in 2016, so they use the past tense. use of bullet points. This is very clean, very easy, organized to read. And descriptions showcased what was accomplished. So keep that in mind. Also, under each section, I mentioned that you're supposed to have the sections from most relevant to least relevant. So, but make sure you have every duty, I guess, mini subsection listed in reverse chronological order. So this means, from most recent to less recent. For example, under honors and awards, they listed December 2016 first, which is the most recent, and then they go back. Skills, technological skills is a great way to make your CV stand out, especially in this new world we're living in, and especially if you're even like a STEM major. For example, this person put their computer skills, Microsoft Office, which is always great to have, Final Cut Pro, WordPress, Adobe Photoshop, and InDesign. These are a software that is relevant to being the art community. It would help you in your schoolwork, in your long-term career, of working in the art field. And they also added that they're fluent in Spanish and intermediate Italian. Like I mentioned earlier, their objective their research interest was in, I think, like Italian art. So, intermediate Italian, this stands out because it kind of supports the claim that they will be a good addition to the program. And lastly, memberships. They added, Hollywood Arts Council, California Alliance of Arts Education, clubs, memberships that are, closely aligned with, being an art major. Also, this is a great time to, add your leadership, add leadership, and what you did at this time, and add quantifiable description. For example, increased membership by so-and-so percent, led, gave presentations to so-and-so many people, bi-weekly presentations, something like this. And also, if these memberships may not be well known, these organizations, so make sure to add a description of what they are. Kind of explain like how it's related to getting into grad school, to what you're wanting to major in. So your reference page, this is something that when you submit your CV to graduate school, if they have a form to submit references, you really don't need to include a reference page to your CV. But if they do not, you can include a reference page. So, they make sure to avoid any identifiable information like race, religion, age, ethnicity in the title. The only issue I have with this reference page, if it's submitted along with the previous CV, is making sure where your name and the street address, all that information is formatted the same as how your name, your street address, telephone, email will be formatted in the first page of your CV. So make sure it's like centered, same font, bolded, unbolded, same as the first page of your CV. So 3 references are standard for your CV. Include appropriate information like the relationship, and make sure to avoid family and friends as references. I know it's going to be hard to believe, but these people can be biased, and since they're not, your academic, professional references, is going to raise a red flag for the admissions committee. So the next CV I have, they include appropriate information and a reliable information in the beginning. For example, their email, it's actually their school email. So if you still have access to the Troy EDU, this is a great one to use. It'll look more professional than if you use maybe like hotmail.com, something like that. And even in the name, Troy, I guess, gives you your like initials, last name as like the name part of the email. This looks a lot better than if you had some type of nickname, something that you made up. So they began with the most relevant section, which is education. The only thing they really didn't do was they didn't add any describing. They didn't describe anything that they did when they were in school, or anything like a thesis, their major. Well, they had their major. Sorry, but anything else that can help describe to prove a point that they would be a good addition to the program. But they did describe, I guess, very well during the teaching experience section. Description showcases the ability to be a successful graduate student. So adding, they tutored students and underwent biweekly calibration and discussion with professors and other writing fellows. Even the word biweekly is quite quantifiable because it kind of shows you how often you did, can be counted, how often you did these discussions. Make sure that, under honors and awards, they made sure to list everything in reverse chronological order, most present to, I guess, farthest back in the past. And here they added, professional experience after their teaching experience and research experience, because it is, I guess, the least related compared to those. So make sure that what you is most relevant to in the future. It's almost kind of like in a movie. You make sure they kind of start off with something to grab your attention, to pull you in, the most relevant information, what you would find most exciting. So that's kind of what you want to do in your CV, is have this most relevant information in the beginning, so it kind of pulls in the admissions committee's attention. And the same goes for when you write your personal statement, do your interview, write your essays for classes you are in right now. They added a great quantifiable term like biweekly. They added arts and culture sections of the biweekly publication. And they made sure to use consistent use of formatting, easy to read font. For example, the sections academic memberships, university and community service, they're both same size font, same type of font, and they're both bolded, and they're both all caps. So you want to make sure if you do this for one section, you have to do it for all. So keep everything uniform. Easy to read font. They didn't use anything like cursive, sticking to a very basic font. Like I think like New Times Roman is a great one to use, something that's very readable. And lastly, they added 3 references, but they included it on to the end of their CV, so a little different format. And like I said earlier, when you submit your application, if the graduate school is asking for like a separate place to submit references, you don't really necessarily need to include them on the CV. And I'm big on, I believe, like self-help, so providing websites, resources. One resource I highly recommend you all use would be called wordvice.com. And I'm going to try to open that up shortly so you can kind of see they have a lot of great videos, tips of not just preparing your CV, but every part of the graduate school application. Purdue OWL, I'm sure you all have heard of this. and I've seen a couple professors in the I guess in the audience in this presentation. So I'm sure you've recommended maybe this to your students. They don't have just great references about sticking to APA, MLA format, academic writing, but anything, even when it comes to admissions to school. So any of the academic, it's a great resource to use. Prep Scholar, it was a great great one. It's kind of where I got the reference or the examples to show you all. In resume.now.com, I believe it kind of helps you kind of figure out how to describe things a little better than you thought to, how you can lay it out where it really shows it really sells you to the admissions committee. And also gograd.org is a great resource to use with a lot of health information, and overleaf.com, they kind of show you some templates, some examples of how to format the CV. So let me see if I can open Word files. So I hope, can you all see this? I hope, but yeah, you see like how to write a flawless CV for graduate school. So they break it down a lot like I did in the presentation, offer a video of what to include, what not to include, what the admissions committee is looking for. And as you see up top here, I mean, they have help for statement of purposes, personal statement, letter of recommendations, how to ask for them, who to ask, what they should include. So all this information, it would be really helpful. So with that said, that is my presentation. If you want to ask me any questions, I'll be happy to answer them now. But on the screen here, you can see my contact information. So you can reach out to me by email or LinkedIn. These are the two best, I guess, places to reach out to me at. So that said, do any of y'all have any questions for me about the process? I don't know if Emily or Erica has any questions or anything like that. So anything to add?
Okay, it looks like we have a question in the chat box. Let me pull it up. Will we have access to the recorded session after? Yes, so we did record it. We will get it uploaded onto our YouTube page, so it will be available there, but we will send it out to everyone who registered for the session in Handshake, so you'll receive it, or you can find our page on YouTube. It's just at Troy U Career, and you'll be able to find the session there. Do we have any other questions for Mack or anything about the presentation that you want clarified? All right, great job, great job. Thank you. I hope this was helpful, and I saw a lot of faculty on too, so thank you for participating and hopefully being able to pass the word along to students and let us know if we missed anything or if there's things that you typically see in your field as well. Mack, are you able to share the slides at all?
Yeah, I mean, like send. I can give them to you. I can send like an email if you want to.
Okay.
I mean, that would be fine. I mean, I'm not selfish, so.
And you'll be able to get that as long as you were registered in Handshake, or you can reach out to us. I'll type our email address if you don't think you were registered, so that way we'll be able to share it with you. So we are troycareer@troy.edu if you need to reach out for a copy of the slides or the YouTube link. right, I'm not seeing any more questions, so it looks like we're good to go. Again, you can always email us, troycareer@troy.edu, or you can follow us along on our social media. We have LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. You can look for us. Troy U Career is our username for those, and we'll post useful tips and tricks like this, as well as our other workshops that we're going to host. Our actual office that we work out of is located on the Troy campus in Eldridge Hall. We're in room 124. So you are able to come see us there, and we also are scheduling virtual appointments via Teams to meet with students. If you would like your CV or your resume reviewed, you can email it to our office at our email address, troycareer@troy.edu, and we will have someone review that for you virtually with a video, so you'll be able to refer back to that as you make your changes. And Erica has put our YouTube link in, so you can save that, and that's where the presentation will be uploaded probably tomorrow. All right, thank you so much, you guys, and just please let us know if we can help you in the future.